Greetings of the day and welcome to yet another edition of the Chief Auditor series. We have a very eminent speaker today, Sanjeev Sood, who represents the industry. He's the head of the audit of the industry. And we intend to bring in this Chief Auditor series lots of accommodations, lots of people who have got who are part of the internal audit profession. And this is the intention of this, as we discussed, is to bring a lot of learning in the profession of internal auditing and leave a legacy for the times to come.
This has been a fantastic journey. In fact, so far we have covered 15 chief audit executives, and this has been a fantastic journey so far with lots and lots of learnings. Satish and I have learned as we have been looking at the presentations, as we have been speaking to chief audit executives, and we feel that this is a lot of gems, lot of precious things for the internal audit fraternity, whether it is students, whether it is CAEs, whether it is academics, whether it is the team members in internal audit. The entire profession is going to benefit from these series, which are going to remain there for people to see and learn.
So let's take a while to introduce Sanjeev Sood to all of us. Sanjeev Sood is the Executive Vice President, Internal Assurance and Chief Audit Executive in Max Life Insurance Company Limited. He is a finance professional with more than 25 years of experience in both internal audit as well as core finance functions. He is a chartered accountant, certified internal auditor, a certified information systems auditor, a CISA, and a certified fraud examiner, that is a CFE. So all the certifications have been completed by him. He has also completed 1 year executive program in business management from IIT Kolkata. Sanjeev is also a certified professional coach trained under ICF accredited coach training program. Sanjeev is presently working with Max Life Insurance as Executive Vice President, Internal Assurance and Chief Audit Executive since April 2010. April 2010, so 11 long years. And prior to that, he had a long stint of 12 years with Bharti Airtel Limited. During his professional career, Sanjeev has worked in different leadership roles across internal audit, risk management, compliance, and finance functions. His areas of specialization are deploying internal audit and risk management frameworks, IT and forensic audits, and fraud prevention and control. Professionally, Sanjeev has been actively engaged in the initiatives of Internal Audit Standards Board of ICAI and has also served as Board of Governor member of the Delhi chapter of IIA for the last 5 years. And that's where I have been having a lot of interaction with Sanjeev. Excellent speaker, to the point, and we all look forward to a very, very insightful session, Sanjeev.
All right. Thank you very much, Satish and Deepjee. It's been a real honor to share my journey and my experiences, as we rolled out. And what I've done today for today's session is, and the title that I've picked up for my presentation is Moving Beyond the Core. While I have seen the sessions, by various speakers earlier, as you talked about, which is more talking about internal audit per se, the process that we follow. I think what we are trying to, I personally feel that, and I am a firm believer of the word that internal audit, if it has to flourish, one has to become a trusted advisor of all stakeholders across the governance model, right from the board to the audit committee to the management. And at times, one can argue, have a different point of view that why management. But I personally feel that if you really want to become a trusted advisor, you can't be just only working for the board or the audit committee. You have to work very cohesively and create a model where the management is very comfortable coming out to internal audit, and not seeing an internal audit is not being seen as an adversary, but rather as a supporter in the journey of driving and strengthening controls. I think that's my firm belief, and that's what you will see in my presentation. I'll not talk much about internal audit, but I will talk about initiatives that we have deployed at Max Life, of course, and my earlier, areas in Airtel as well to some extent. But, try to build the overall motto of strengthening the control environment of the organization through various initiatives. So, with that, I'll just, share my presentation. My screen is visible, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay.
You can make it full screen. Yeah.
Yes, perfect.
Perfect.
So,
Go ahead, Sanjeev.
Yeah. So I was saying that, that's why I picked up the title of Internal Assurance and Max Life, moving beyond the core. I think that's what I'm going to talk about in the next 20 odd minutes. This is the brief, agenda that I'm going to touch upon. Briefly, just a slide on Max Life. I'll also, touch upon the differentiator of life insurance. Life insurance specifically is a slightly unique industry from a service standpoint. And I thought it's important for the participant to understand the nuances that one kind of look at while auditing, specialist industries like insurance. So that's where I'll speak briefly. Internal assurance, I'll just give an overview, and then of course key expectation and the meat of the presentation is more some of the initiatives that I'm going to talk about, which we have rolled out. Driving with the whole objective of strengthening the overall control environment of across the organization. So I'll not spend much time. I think this is available in the public domain, but clearly, Max Life envisions to be the most admired life insurance company, and primarily that's where we said that by securing the financial future of the customer. I think that's the clear vision that we have put across. It's a multi-channel distribution. We serve the customer through a long-term saving, protection, and retirement solutions as well. If you look at the numbers, we are the highest in the claim paid ratio across the industry, really topping the chart. You can't ask for more, 99.35%. These are published numbers from IRDAI. And that's one key metric that customers look forward to, that how many claims are actually being processed and approved by the insurer. Presence across India, various cities, we are managing a sum of an asset under management of close to 1 lakh crore. This has now come up much more, but these are numbers of FY21. So I'm not kind of putting across the recent number, but these are numbers which are published for FY21. On people side, you will see that we are the only insurance company which are featuring in the Great Place to Work. I mean, 18th amongst India's best companies to work for 21. I think clear focus has been on employee. As a pillar of really driving this growth. We are as an organization growing 25% CAGR for the last few years now. So clearly, from our industry standpoint as well as from our organization standpoint, that's the benchmark that we have set for ourselves, and of course we'll continue to move in that journey. Let me spend some time on key differentiators and specifically internal audit in a life insurance segment. Of course, my previous work experience has been more in telecom, which is high on volume but low on value. The ticket sizes are low. This is just an opposite to this, right? Which is the values are high, but volumes are not. I mean, volumes are still high, but not as high as a telecom, where you have tons of trillions of data in terms of TBs of data. Here it's more, we are more talking about gigabytes. There the data is now exponentially growing. So clearly, it's a complex business. It's not a every product that one offers to the customer. There are multiple initiatives, multiple setups. The system setup needs to be done. So there are it's quite a complex environment that one really has to build in. Just giving you a flavor of close to 250 variants. You have riders, you have products, you have policies, you have different benefit charges, structures, and these are all very have to well defined, considering it's a financial element involved. So the control has to be of top class, and that's why one needs to be very clear about how are we ensuring the right amount and payouts happen to the customer. Regulated, of course, highly, considering we deal with public money. We have a very active regulator as well. Who there are regulations that keeps coming, both on the product side as well as on the basically the interest of the shareholders, policyholders, and intermediaries. So that again poses an important challenge in terms of setting that up. I think that's another important element, because we have to make sure that we are fully compliant to all regulation at all times. So that's an important element. Insurance specific risks are also very, very important, especially in times, when we had a huge once in a century kind of event of COVID, and you see mortality risk. I think you would have read quite a few reinsurers, insurance companies have been deeply hit, because the assumptions that have been set across how many deaths should happen, have gone for a complete toss. So that's another important risk that we have to kind of clearly be aware of, because that will build in how we can secure, as an organization, the basic risk of our existence by managing those mortality. Fraud is another important risk, specifically in India, where, of course, we have now moved to a scenario where we do have KYC and Aadhaar-based things, but clearly we still have long way to go in terms of settling that up and ensuring that everything is world class. We still have, issues of fraud instances where people are trying to get try to get policies being issued on by not declaring fully, or there are challenges around specifically at village level. So some of those have to be clearly being identified and well understood. So that's another area which is considering to be an important risk. And financial, of course, is how do you manage the investments? I think that is an important element, considering we deal with both debt, equity, derivatives, some of those transactions, so it's very, very important that there are top-notch controls being deployed, so that we don't kind of get exposed on diversification risk. And finally, of course, it is a multi-channel distribution. We have presence across banking channel, our own agency. We do have digital, our own website platform. So there are, of course, a multi-distribution channel also provides elements of how do we really build in controls around various channels to really drive and ensure that nothing goes wrong, in that kind of a complex and a highly distributed channel. So those are the key elements, I would say, that are important for one to understand while dealing with an insurance, life insurance industry and auditing that. So complex, high value, highly regulated. Making sure that the risks management practices are of top notch and kind of clearly deployed and well understood across the organization. It can't be at a top level. It has to really pass through across the organization. And finally, on the distribution being the core, how do you ensure that it's being well understood, the features are well, shared, or policyholders are being made aware of all those nuances of a respective policy. So that is a very, very, very important element which will drive overall life insurance business, I would say. Moving on to the core of internal assurance at Max Life. I think that's how we are structured. We, of course, do have a solid line reporting to the audit committee. I do have 4 different verticals that we have kind of put across within the internal assurance umbrella that we call it. The first one, of course, is the internal audit, which is the core, the audit function, primarily providing independent assurance to the audit committee, conducting the audits as per the plan. You'll see that there are centralized audits which are being performed, which are more corporate audits, as we call it. And then, of course, we do branch audits as well, which we generally try and cover, at least once in 2 years. So that's the overall, audit function, which is primarily the core internal audit, as generally you will find in most of the functions. Fraud prevention and control is another element which is there, which we have, which is now part of the overall internal assurance team here. The primary objective is to drive fraud prevention across the organization, and this will include all kind of frauds, right, from a financial fraud to investigations, which it also includes mis-selling cases, which is more like operational issues that we face, any complaint that we receive from the customer. So all set of frauds, internal, external, that kind of we handle. So this team is a fairly large team, because we do deal with high number of operational fraud investigations as well. So those teams are being well taken care of. And of course, I'll share more on the initiatives where we have now deployed a very digitized version of data analytics, because now with the advent of technology, there are now rules being set up in the system which can throw out those red flags. So I'll talk more on that as well. The third element, which I alluded to in the beginning as well, is that a very, very important stakeholder, if you want to really become a trusted advisor, is the management as well. And when I say management, it's primarily the CEO and his DRs at the most, but primarily the CEO. So at times when we say management assurance, the element that comes in is that how do because at times what happens is that the CEO would like us to give an independent view on certain items. Any project that is going on which is not working, why it's not working, is more like getting an independent set of eyes looking at it from a CEO's office and providing an insights in terms of what's happening on the ground. So I think that's where we really built in, and there are a couple of initiatives that we have rolled out, and I'll talk more in the subsequent slides. The important one, which I've called out as an acronym, as called CARE, which is concurrent assurance in real-time environment. I think that's the first one that we have deployed, I would say very proudly, across the industry, where we now built in models, and I'll talk more, when I talk about that slide. But in brief, what we have tried to create is we have tried to replicate the systems which are there, which calculates the financial payout that has to go to the policyholder, by creating a replica of that independently. We are performing a parallel calculation of how much amount needs to go to the each policyholder. So I think that's where an independent view on making the process really zero defect, in that sense. So I think that is an important initiative that we have rolled out. And finally, you will see, while internal audit is being seen as risk-based audits and all that, while that's good and that's where the internal audit team focuses on, but in my view, I think the real sense will come in when you really go down to the process level as well. And that's where we have deployed a small team, but primarily the objective of that team is to do process assessments. It is akin to ISO, but not ISO. I mean, what we have created is our own framework, where we have defined parameters, and we call it as process maturity and performance index, where we score all the important processes, close to 100 processes that we cover across, and try to provide insights not on control, but more on efficiency, more on process adherence, and trying to identify whether the processes are well understood on the ground as well. So it is like a bottoms-up approach, one can say, to really build in that kind of a frame. So that those are the overall how we have structured. So you'll see internal audit being one piece of it, but you will see much more additional elements which generally are not part of the audit, but as part of the internal assurance in the broadened framework, we have tried to put it across, and that's where we try to achieve the objective that we have set for ourselves of being become a trusted advisor to all the stakeholders, right from the board to the audit committee and to the management. I think that's the frame that we have taken at Max Life. Moving on, I think, and when we kind of, I think 3 years ago we set on this journey, when we said that how do we transform from IA, traditional IA, to a 2.0, or now people call it 3.0. If you look at Deloitte and all, what we said was that let's try and see what is the pain points when we reach out. Of course, we do have audit committee which keeps giving us directions, and the annual audit plan gets approved and all that. But what we said that let's reach out to the leadership team and see what are their expectations from the audit team, because ultimately it is important for us to know and become aware of what are their expectations from this team. And that's where some of those elements that comes in is you can see that enhancing awareness and culture of internal controls. Does people on the ground know is control beneficial or is not a burden? I think that's some of the element that comes in. how can we support in achieving the zero defect in financial transactions? And that's where the genesis of CARE was kind of the idea came into play. Irrespective of how much automation that you do, you still have some manual controls being left. So one of the asks that came in was that how do we know the manual controls are working effectively? While departments do have quality checks or quality adherence, but one of the challenges one faces is that it is still with them, right? It is with the process owners. One of the aspects that came in is that how can one somebody who's outside the system can tell us, tell the leadership team that this is what the what are the level of controls which are there, specifically manual controls, because the possibility of something going wrong in a manual control is of importance, and we can't afford even manual controls to fail. So that's where this is one ask that came across. This one is an important one which across came in, that how can we proactively identify that this is a potential fraud risk that is coming there. While of course you do have underwriting teams, you do have multiple business analytics models being deployed by the business, but I think the thought that came from the leadership team when we did this workshop was that while we keep doing what we have been doing, the business will keep doing what we have been doing, but we want somebody else to look at it with an independent pair of eyes. And also because you are outside the system, you will be able to connect the dots that if this is happening, how can that be linked in. So more again a consulting frame, just generally that's why we hire consultants, that you want to bring in somebody with who has more experience, who doesn't have carry the burden of knowing what the process is like, who will ask stupid questions and then try to build on those as well. So I think that's the frame that came in, and that's where we kind of build in that initiative. And then finally the thought that came in, that we were ISO certified company, but we over a period of time we noted that it is more becoming a check in the box, right? As and when the audit comes in, suddenly you will create those processes, you will update everything, and then suddenly, okay, the ISO audit is done. So the thought that came in is that how can we make it, continuous process, right? So it's not once in 3 years or once in a year, ISO auditor comes in and then looks at it. How can we really make it, people, the process has become a live document rather than a once in a year updation document or once in 3 years an updation document. I think that's the pain point that came in, and that's where we initiated this journey on building in process maturity. Of course, this require a lot of support, and when all of this came through this workshop, I was really overwhelmed to see that so much is asked that being come in, but we have been really being able to pick up each of these elements in piecemeal and being able to do a POC first, showcase to the management or to the respective stakeholder, is it what they were looking for, and then of course make changes across the whole process, because it can't be that the first time you'll get it right. You have to be at it. You'll have to be really drive some of those initiatives to really create value for the organization. So that's this workshop, I think 3.5 years ago, really gave us a very good frame of how can we move from pure internal audit to a larger frame of moving beyond the core of IA. I'll now move on to those 5 initiatives that we have deployed, and each one of them, when I look back, really give me a good level of satisfaction, and you'll be able to relate to some of the expectations that the stakeholders have shared with me. So these are the 5, and what we have done is we have tried to give an acronym to each one of them just to brand them. I think this is I picked up, although I've not worked with consulting firms, but I think this is what I picked up from them, that if you try to brand some of these initiatives, it will have a better recall value across the organization. So the first one is more around building awareness. This we started, I think, 2 years ago, where what we were noting was that specifically in a large setup, we are close to 15,000 employees across the organization, right? And then most of them are distribution where the attrition levels are quite high, while the trainings that we provide is more on the functional training, which is on the product side, and trying to build on some of those as well. But of course, on control specifically, this is the ask that came in from the CEO also, that how can we really identify to begin with the control owners, control champions across various processes, and at least up the level of awareness around control. And that's where the genesis or the initiative that we called as CLAP, Control Learning and Awareness Program, that we launched. This was launched in one of the town halls by the CEO himself. Primarily objective is to drive a self-paced e-learning module. We do have now a very well laid down digital process. And I'll talk more about it in detail in terms of the pedagogy that we have followed and all that. But it is we close to now 500 plus employees have already certified on this one. So we are on this journey. I think, and specifically we are focusing more on control owners to really drive that to begin with. The next one is care. This one was the first one that we started, actually, the management assurance piece. And this came in when we were looking at few audits, we are identifying some gaps, and then we noted was that if you identify the gap post facto after a year down the line, if you find any errors, then of course there are challenges. One, of course, the customer will get impacted. You have to pay interest on in case you have paid less. In case you have paid more, then you can't recover. So that's where we build on this model of real-time reporting. We call it concurrent assurance in real-time environment. I think that's where this whole thing started, where we started small with one processes. We are now gradually moving to close to 70 to 80% of the payouts that currently happen goes through this model. So that means that it is really becoming a zero defect process as we move on. The third one is around the issues of how do we give a assurance on the manual controls, the level of manual controls. And that's where we initiated this journey. On manual control, the challenge is that you can't use data. You have to actually look at the traditional way of doing it, which is sample testing. You really try and build on identify what are the key transactions which are happening, what are the key controls which are there. So instead of doing once a year audit, while the audit will happen as per its own flow, but what we have developed is we have created as a continuous transaction assurance program, as we call it, CTAP, where we are trying to identify on critical manual controls, keep doing sample testing on a periodic basis, say monthly, and then keep reporting up what kind of outages that you're coming up. So you don't have to wait. While you can't make it real time, considering you have to have some bit of it, but at least what we're trying to do is minimizing the amount or minimizing the time of identifying the issues that could be there. So that's again has kind of taken up well, given us a very good view overall on this one. The fourth one, of course, is the process maturity and performance index. I think that's what kind of I briefly touched upon, which is primarily assessing efficacy of process design, definition, performance, and improvement. What we have done is, while creating this model, we have picked up the best practices from the ISO, from Malcolm Baldrige, another quality model, which primarily reviews the organization. There are other process models that we have kind of picked across, and we have created our own index. Primarily, the focus is on adherence of the process on the ground, as well as awareness of the process. So you assess people on both awareness by interviewing people. So it is more like a tell me, show me kind of approach, where you don't get too deep. You ask questions, you ask them to share in case they have any evidences, and then you move on. So that's an important journey, I would say, which is more giving a bottoms-up view to the internal assurance team in terms of how the processes are featuring in. And finally, the fraud net system that we have kind of built in. I think in this one, what we have built in is try to create a frame of fraud prevention. And again, we use multiple models. We use, of course, some of the queries are built in R, Python. We also use, of course, ACL. And then, of course, over a period of time, we are now moving towards creating a BI tool to create a kind of a more like a dashboard to really drive this outages or exceptions, where you can link it down to the policy level. You identify from the top which product, which zone, which geography, which kind of occupation of customers, and you really try to able to boil it down to the the real policy which is coming out. And then, of course, you can do maybe various other fraud prevention tests as such. So these are the five key practices, I would say, that we have deployed. I'm conscious of time as well. So maybe at this point in time, if I can pause and Deepjee and Satish, if you have any follow-up questions, I'll be happy to answer that.
Sure, Sanjeev. I think this has been a very interesting presentation by you. As you are presenting, a lot of thoughts are flowing in the mind. So there are so many questions. So let me just collect my thoughts and ask you one thing. We talked about moving away from internal audit, moving away and becoming a trusted business advisor, in which there are 5 initiatives which you have outlined: CLAP, CARE, CTAP, PMPI, and FraudNet. Now, each of these initiatives, if we talk about, in fact, for each process, all 5 or any of these can fit in. You can work on any of these for each of the processes that you identify. So you can decide, if you talked about 500 processes you have taken up, maybe there are 1,000 processes in the company, and you can decide for which processes CLAP would be taken up, which processes CARE would be taken up. So first of all, who owns to start this initiative? Who's owning these initiatives to make it happen, roll it out across the company? Number one. Number two is, how do you decide, for which process, what should be applied, which will be optimal for the best output for the organization? So how does it all work? All these initiatives, how do you rule out? Because it sounds very simple, but an organization is a living organism,
Yeah.
And it's very difficult to make things happen in a process with human beings. So how do you roll out these initiatives? How do you fit them into each other? And how does it work? And how many years or months it will take, or it has already taken, and where will the journey end? How do you start and how do you end? Just throw light on that so that it is beneficial to other internal auditors who would want to take up these initiatives.
Yeah. So
Sanjeev, you would like to close the presentation? Then we'll have a better.
Sure.
We can close the
Yes,
presentation. We can,
that's right. Yes, of course.
Yes.
Thank you, Deepjee, for this this important question. I think clearly this has not happened, in a month's time or in a year's time. I think this has been a journey. As I've been saying, we have been at it. It's close to 3.5 years ago. We started this workshop we did, where we were actually taking this feedback. We have a process of taking feedback from audit committee, from the board, from management as well. While we are getting good insights from the audit committee and all, but from the management, there has always been this thing: how can we support in the journey of growth of the business? And I think that's where some of these initiatives, step by step, took place. And on your question on how do we decide, I think it is primarily led by the ask that come through from the business only, right? We are just supporting it. So they will, so for example, when I talk about CARE, which is the first one that we started off, the challenge was when we kind of doing some audit. After a year's time, we identifying some issue. We take it to the business leader. He said, "Ek saal ke baad aa rahe ho, matlab, we have lost that much of time. We have to pay interest, or we have lost the money which we have overpaid, right? So how can you support? Since you have done it, my team has not been able to do it. The business leader said that, can you partner with me? Can you support me in this initiative? I'm willing to provide you with knowledge, with this thing, because ultimately as auditors we don't have that business knowledge, and that has created a big bond between the two teams. We are not seen as adversaries. We are welcomed actually, by the business owner, because they know that ultimately we are working in the interest of the organization. So I think the mantra here is that, one of course is you have to know the business, you have to understand. You can't also be completely away, because if you, and the other is you have to show value to them. You have to show value. And then the business leader said, I will give you additional resources from my budget. The budget is always a challenge for auditors, right? You keep asking, mujhe ek banda dene ke liye board pe jana padega, right? So, that's where this whole thing came in, where they said, I will give my personal budget from my side, but, I need an assurance as a business leader, right? So
Right.
that's where, so the answer to the question is the priority will come in from the business leader. We will just facilitate. We'll say that we have this model available. Whosoever want these services, you come and then, you come and pay, and then, you take those services.
So all the 5 services like that, you at some point you designed, or you got to ask from the process owners, and you started
Absolutely.
it off, and then it's been rolled out slowly across the organization.
Absolutely.
So are there specific auditors in your organization, in your department, who look after each of these services, or is it a team approach, or how does it work? How does it got monitored over a period of time?
Yes, so I think we do have as I shared my structure as well. So we have a core internal audit team, and then you have a management assurance team as well, which has built over a period of time, of course, as well. And the ask that the KPI for those team is like a consulting frame that you have to earn that business from the respective business leaders to survive as well, right? Ultimately, and their agenda is to keep kind of expanding their whole work, so that we and it's a live organization, and you continue to deploy new product, new system aa rahe hain, there are things that will keep changing. It's not a static organization, considering anyway service industry mein to, you keep kind of doing, every day is a new day, right? And every day brings in new challenges. So opportunities are galore. It's just that you identify those opportunities, work on it, and then partner with the business, really drive it.
Sure.
So Sanjeev, I want to clap for you.
Thank you.
The idea is, and the question is also on the word clap. Control learning and awareness program. Can you elaborate a little? Means, what is this control learning? If I just take these 2 words, control learning.
Yeah.
What is it?
So what we have deployed, thank you, Satish, and while we were workshopping on what naming that we should give, there are a lot of acronyms that came across, and and we want to give a positive spin, and of course we have to juxtapose some of those as well, and that's where this clap came in, that it really drives positive. And in a organization which is primarily distribution driven, we are a sales oriented organization, right? 15,000 may say 13,000 employees are sales, right? So the positivity aspect is very, very important. So control learning and awareness program, this came in, Satish, primarily when we were kind of really doing a RCA of what is causing some bit of audit issues coming out. Why those audit issues are coming out? There are multiple RCA comes in. Some will say diffuse accountability, or there are cross-functional leakages. It's not in mind, or siloed approach. So those normal stuff are coming in, and that's where again when I was presenting to the management team, ultimate aim would be of the real proof of the audit output would come in is, in case you are able to really ask those 5 whys, really get down to why this issue is coming in. And when we really went down to 5 whys, the core came in is that people have moved on from one position to another, but their awareness of is of control around internal controls, importance of internal control in a financial service industry is not that much. And that's where we created this model, which is a 90-minute module, but it has multiple elements, right from the basics of internal control to it talks about how do we really have those case studies as well, some examples as well. So and after that you also have to go through an exam, like a 25 questionnaire. So it's not like a normal just see the video or baith ke band karke baith jao. It is a two-way communication that we have built in. And when it gets launched by the CEO, of course, the message also gets loud and clear that, we really have to drive it. So that support also, we've been fortunate enough to get. But this has been a very, very important journey to really drive awareness across the organization.
You really are doing unique things, Sanjeev. Absolutely unique.
Great. This is a little offbeat question which came to my mind, but I should ask you.
Yeah.
You have this. You talked about fraud, but you talked about risk in insurance. Being a life insurance company. So is the risk different for different regions, or is the risk based on, maybe you have more cancer cases in a particular state, so is it the risk weightage
Yeah. So
in the
Deepjee,
country, and if people move abroad, how does it work? Just wanting to know more about the life insurance industry right now in India, and how does it work?
Yeah. So overall, there are of course geographical risks that are there. You'll find more because of the climate or because of some other factors. I think that you'll find certain concentrated areas or belts where you'll find more cancer patient and all that. So I think that clearly is being there, and over a period of time, this is the claims experiences that we get. Some of those models has been created, within the by the business intelligence team as well. So on a fraud net, I mean but that's part and parcel of the business itself. On the fraud risk side, I think we do have pockets where where we find more fraud instances coming in around claims, specifically around document tampering. And that's where we've created those zones as well, where of course there are multiple initiatives being launched. One of course is you identify, nowadays technology is helping us to identify document tampering, so that you have deployed that as a tool. Then of course you have investigation agencies which reach out and goes out to people. But to answer your question, yes, there are of course zones being created, and then you keep learning from your experiences. Besides that, what we have also done as an industry is we do have a data sharing mechanism now in place. With a RDI firm called IIB, Indian Institute of the IIB is a repository available where all those fraud instances, declined cases get reported up, and we use that quite effectively as well. But definitely there are trends and there are pockets of concentration which throws out those issues.
My question last question which I had was, just as you explained the CLAP principle, you also have a CTAP which says Continuous Transaction Assurance Program. So is this like a control, like a CCM, continuous control monitoring? Yes, it is.
It is. So continuous control monitoring would be more primarily on data driven. So CARE is more CCM. CARE is, you can say, more CCM because it is real time. CTAP is primarily, wherever there is a manual control involved, where you can't do on data, irrespective of. So for example, if somebody has put in a request for change of mobile number and given a signed application, and nowadays phone number is so important, right? If you change somebody changes your phone number, the money will can go away. So those instances where you have transactions coming in, where somebody is signing off, are the signature matching or not? Of course, there are checks at the front level also. But what we do is, for certain important controls, we pick up few transactions, say whatever number sample transaction, and then report out to the leaders that, one report he'll get from his QA team, quality assurance team, that, this is the outage. And one report he'll get from us, right? As an independent body who doesn't have any interest, right? And then he will try and see if they are in sync. Then of course he says, okay, I mean, maybe 0.1 or whatever percent, because in manual there would be some errors. You can't just make it zero defect. But through this, the business leader will get a good sense, and he can sleep well at night, that things are pretty much in control.
Deepjee, if you permit me, I have one more last question.
Please. I think we should not. Sanjeev is here and we should pick his brains.
So happily and so smilingly answering the question, I thought I had to ask him one more question.
Please.
Can you just briefly tell us, very briefly tell us, and I don't want any information, on the underwriting process, how is this audit being done, and is there any special care that you take for underwriting?
So underwriting is quite automated actually. Quite a lot of it is automated also. But again, it gets covered under CTAP. So whatever underwriting rules that we have been defined, so because it will be, so one is automated is more data driven. That is fine. But wherever there is a mind application or there are rules being defined, which the underwriter has to go through and look at it, you will try and cover under CTAP to really provide a view.
Comprehensive, comprehensive. First class. Yes, Deepjee.
Right.
Yeah.
So I think great. I think really great. So I think Satish, with your permission and with Sanjeev's permission, I'll just sum it up.
Yes, please. Yes.
I think it was
Wonderful.
such an interesting session. Sanjeev, heads off to you. Wonderful session.
Thank you.
A lot of learnings from the session, and of course, you're working for a great company, as you rightly said. 18th ranked. Where is this ranking from? For best employee born.
Great place to work from economic times.
Great place to work, which is really great. So great company, and so you have a great company with a great chief internal auditor. So good. So I'll just sum it up. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to read out those 5 things which he said. I like the entire structure. Moving away from internal audit. So of course you have to do your bread and butter, the brass tacks, the grassroots internal audit. You have to do your fraud prevention. You have to do all other things. Or IFC control testing. So all that is built. Data analytics. Everything has to build. But the 5 initiatives and the naming of those initiatives has been so good because there are a lot of takeaways for the internal audit fraternity, because you can adopt any or all of these in your work area, and many of them are already doing that. So I'm just going to summarize by saying there's CLAP, which is Control Learning and Awareness Program. Okay. So they have made a 90-minute capsule where each person is being trained to become more aware of controls, which really aids the entire organization. Number 2 is CARE, which is Concurrent Assurance in Real-Time Environment. So there, Sanjeev's team, and they are involved in ensuring that the claim calculations are being done in a real-time environment, or any calculation is done in a real-time environment, which is critical to insurance industry. But you can have the same application in different industries. Absolutely. In hospitality, you can calculate, for the guest. So similarly, this can be employed, concurrent assurance in real-time environment for any critical function which you can partner with the stakeholders. Number 3 is CTAP, which is Continuous Transaction Assurance Program, again, where there are manual controls, because even though you may have automated controls all the time, there are few manual controls which are still there. So you may look at, running Continuous Transaction Assurance Program for manual controls to make it better. Then you have PMPI, which is Process Maturity and Performance Index. Then you have got FraudNet, which is timely fraud detection through analytics. So you have all these things which are flowing in. For PMPI, of course, you have got ISO, you have quality checks, benchmarks which you can use, any quality standards you can use. So internal auditors have a lot of scope to work in any or all of these areas, which is a great takeaway from today's session with Sanjeev. So I think a lot of auditors are already doing this, but the way it has been structured and how this is, Sanjeev clearly pointed out, this is a journey. So, you keep doing this because there's no, you have to be, it is a continuous improvement cycle. So you just keep on working with the management. I think what clearly came out was you have to keep working with your stakeholders, with the CEO, with the top management to ensure that internal audit delivers all the time. So I think this is in terms of value addition, a lot by the internal audit function. So you could call it, his function a value added function. So Satish, you have the last word.
Absolutely, because he said that, the trusted advisor. So when Sanjeev first said trusted advisor, I was thinking how in what way he will substantiate this. But, these 5 pillars and the pillar that Sanjeev himself is for the organization, and for such a long, 11 long years, handling this function and strengthening the controls, as he called it, strengthening the control. Really beautiful 50 minutes that we spent on a Saturday evening. Wonderful. It was simply fantastic. I've heard you speak before, Sanjeev, but today I think you were at your brilliant best.
Thank you, Satish.
Thank you. All the best,
Thank
Sanjeev.
you.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot,
Namaste.
Satish.
Thank you. Thank you, Deepjee. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.